It was a team effort, Michael. We all contributed to this breakthrough. Those were the words my boss, Derek Patterson, said to the patent review board as he submitted my invention under his name. I'm Michael Chen, 34 years old, senior mechanical engineer at Innovate Dynamics in Seattle. I had spent 3 years perfecting a revolutionary micro-gyroscope design that could change aerospace navigation forever. And in that sterile conference room on a gray Tuesday morning, watching Derek claim credit for my life's work, something fundamental shifted inside me. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply nodded and said, "Of course, Derek. Team effort." But I wasn't being agreeable. I was being strategic. You see, Derek made one crucial mistake that gray morning. He assumed I was just another pushover engineer who would quietly accept being robbed of my intellectual property. He had no idea that I had been documenting every step of my invention process with obsessive detail. Every CAD file, every calculation, every late-night breakthrough, all time-stamped and saved on multiple drives, including my personal cloud storage that the company had no access to. Derek Patterson was 45, Harvard, MBA, and had been promoted to head of R&D 2 years earlier, despite having zero technical background. He was the type of manager who took credit for his team's successes and blamed them for any failures. Tall, silver-haired, and impossibly arrogant, he drove a Tesla Model S and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He had joined Innovate Dynamics through a merger, bringing with him a reputation for aggressive innovation management, corporate speak for stealing ideas from subordinates. The micro-gyroscope project had started 3 years earlier when I was working under Derek's predecessor, Janet Willis. Janet was a brilliant engineer who actually understood the technical work we were doing. When she retired, Derek swooped in like a vulture, immediately taking over all ongoing projects. My gyroscope design was entering its final phases, and I could see the hunger in Derek's eyes every time I presented updates. The technology itself was revolutionary. Traditional gyroscopes in aircraft navigation systems were bulky and prone to mechanical failure. My design used a quantum dot array suspended in a magnetic field that could detect rotational movement with unprecedented precision while being 90% smaller than existing systems. Boeing had already expressed interest, and the preliminary market analysis suggested a potential revenue stream of $340 million over 5 years. I should have seen the signs earlier. Derek had started scheduling private meetings with the patent attorney. He'd been asking increasingly detailed questions about my work, claiming he needed to understand the technical aspects for better project management. He even requested copies of all my files for backup purposes. Like an idiot, I complied, thinking he was just being thorough. The first red flag came on a Monday morning in March when Derek announced he'd be presenting the gyroscope design to the patent review board himself. "Michael, you've done great technical work," he said with that condescending smile. "But patent presentations require a certain level of strategic thinking that comes with experience." I remember sitting at my desk that afternoon, staring at my computer screen, when something clicked. I opened my file management system and began checking creation dates on all my project files. Every single original CAD file, every calculation spreadsheet, every design iteration, all created and saved on my personal workstation with timestamps going back 3 years. Derek might have copies of my files, but he didn't have access to the metadata that proved I was the original creator. That's when I started my own documentation project. I began screenshotting everything, file properties showing creation dates, email timestamps of my communications with the patent office, purchase records for the specialized software I'd bought with my own money to run simulations, notes from my discussions with Janet Willis before Derek even joined the company. I compiled 3 years of evidence proving the gyroscope design was entirely my work, but I didn't stop there. I started digging into Derek's history at his previous companies. What I found was a pattern. At Technova Industries, 2 junior engineers had their designs for advanced battery technology mysteriously become collaborative efforts, led by Derek. At Meridian Systems, a software architect named Sarah Kim had left the company abruptly after Derek somehow ended up with patents for her algorithmic innovations. The settlements were sealed, but the pattern was clear. Derek Patterson was a serial idea thief. I reached out to Sarah Kim through LinkedIn. She was now working as a freelance consultant and agreed to meet for coffee. What she told me was chilling. Derek had used the exact same playbook with her. The private meetings, the requests for files, the sudden exclusion from patent presentations. She had tried to fight it legally, but was worn down by the company's superior resources. He's still doing it, isn't he? She asked when I explained my situation. Not for much longer, I replied. Sarah smiled for the first time in our conversation. If you need a witness to his pattern of behavior, I'm happy to help. Meanwhile, Derek was moving forward with the patent application. He scheduled the review board presentation for April 15th, exactly 1 month away. He strutted around the office like a peacock, already planning his promotion party. He'd even ordered a new BMW, bragging about his upcoming patent bonus. I used that month wisely. First, I contacted Jennifer Morrison, Innovate Dynamics' chief legal counsel. Jennifer was a sharp lawyer who'd started as a patent attorney and worked her way up. She was also someone who valued technical innovation and had previously butted heads with Derek over his management style. Jennifer, I said during a carefully timed hallway encounter, I have some concerns about the gyroscope patent application. Could we schedule a brief meeting to discuss proper attribution protocols? Her eyebrows raised slightly. Of course, Michael. How about Thursday at 2 p.m.? During our meeting, I presented my case methodically. I showed her the timeline of my work, the original file creation dates, and my correspondence with the patent office that began 2 years before Derek even joined the company. I presented it all as a concern about proper legal documentation, rather than an accusation of theft. This is concerning, Jennifer said, reviewing the file metadata. The patent application lists Derek as primary inventor with you, as a contributing team member. But these files clearly show you as the original creator. We need to verify this before the application proceeds. I completely understand the need for proper verification, I said calmly. I just want to make sure everything is legally sound. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Michael, I'm going to need you to preserve all these files exactly as they are. Don't modify anything. And please don't discuss this with Derek until we complete our review. Of course, I agreed. Whatever's best for the company. The next 2 weeks were excruciating. Derek continued his victory lap around the office, completely oblivious to the investigation happening behind the scenes. He'd stopped by my cubicle regularly to gloat about the upcoming presentation, making comments like, "Sometimes the best thing a technical person can do is support management's vision," and, "I hope this teaches you the value of true leadership." I just smiled and agreed with everything he said. Meanwhile, Jennifer's legal team was conducting a thorough forensic analysis. They brought in external experts to verify file metadata and examine the technical progression of my design. They interviewed Janet Willis, who confirmed that the gyroscope project had been my sole initiative from the beginning. They even recovered email threads from Derek's corporate account where he explicitly acknowledged that the design was my work. The smoking gun came from Derek's own computer. It discovered that Derek had copied my files to his workstation just 6 weeks earlier, 3 full years after I had created the original designs. The audit logs showed exact timestamps. Derek had accessed my shared drive at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday night and copied every single project file to his personal folder. But Derek had made an even more damning error. In his rush to claim credit, he had modified some of my technical specifications without understanding the underlying physics. His version of the gyroscope design contained mathematical errors that would have made the device completely non-functional. He had literally broken my invention while trying to steal it. April 15th arrived like Judgment Day. The Patent Review Board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room. Derek had prepared an elaborate presentation complete with 3D renderings and market analysis projections. He wore his most expensive suit and arrived early to set up his laptop. At 9:55 a.m., I walked into the conference room along with the other team members Derek had invited to witness his moment of triumph. He smiled at me condescendingly and said, "Thanks for being here to support the team." "Presentation, Michael. Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied. At exactly 10:00 a.m., Jennifer Morrison entered the room, followed by CEO Patricia Hernandez and Head of Security David Kim. The atmosphere shifted immediately when Derek saw the additional attendees. "Derek," Patricia said, her voice carrying the weight of executive authority, "before we begin the patent presentation, we need to address some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding the intellectual property attribution for this project." Derek's confident smile faltered. "I'm sorry, concerns? What kind of concerns?" Jennifer placed a thick folder on the conference table. "Our legal team has conducted a comprehensive review of the gyroscope design's development history. We've discovered significant discrepancies between your patent application and the actual creation timeline of this technology." "I don't understand," Derek said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "This was a collaborative effort. Michael and the team contributed, but I provided the strategic vision and technical guidance that made it possible. Derek, Jennifer continued, can you explain why the original CAD files for this design were created on Michael's workstation 3 years ago, while your copies weren't made until 6 weeks ago? The color drained from Derek's face. Well, obviously I was working with Michael's files. That's how collaboration works. Patricia leaned forward. Can you explain the technical specifications of the quantum dot array suspension system? Derek stammered for a moment. Well, the quantum dots are arranged in a configuration that allows for optimal gyroscopic function. That's not an answer, Patricia said coldly. Can you explain the magnetic field calculations that make this design functional? I'm management, Derek said, his voice rising slightly. I don't need to know every technical detail. That's why I have engineers. Jennifer opened her folder. Derek, in your modified version of Michael's design, you changed the magnetic field strength from 2.7 Tesla to 3.2 Tesla. Can you explain why you made that modification? Derek glanced desperately around the room. To improve performance. That change would have destroyed the quantum coherence necessary for the device to function, I said quietly. It would have made the entire system useless. You sabotaged your own stolen design because you didn't understand the physics behind it, Patricia continued. Our external patent consultant confirmed that your version of the gyroscope would be completely non-functional. Derek's composure finally cracked. This is ridiculous. Michael worked for the company. His work belongs to the company. I was just making sure proper management oversight was applied to the patent process. Proper management oversight? Jennifer's voice was ice cold. Derek, we have email records of you acknowledging that this was entirely Michael's design. We have file audit logs showing you secretly copying his work in the middle of the night. We have testimony from your previous companies about identical patterns of intellectual property theft. That last revelation hit Derek like a physical blow. You contacted my previous employers? We contacted several of your former colleagues, Patricia said. Sarah Kim from Meridian Systems was particularly helpful in establishing your pattern of stealing subordinates' work. Derek looked around the room desperately. You can't prove anything. It's all circumstantial. David Kim, who had been silent until now, placed a laptop on the table and opened it. Derek, this is a live forensic analysis of your computer. We can see every file you accessed, every modification you made, and every attempt to cover your tracks. You copied Michael's files at 11:47 p.m. on March 6th. You modified the technical specifications without understanding them. You scheduled this patent presentation for yourself. Would you like to see the screen captures? The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Derek stared at the laptop screen, seeing his entire scheme laid out in undeniable digital evidence. I want to call my lawyer, he said weakly. That's probably wise, Patricia replied, because as of this moment, you're suspended pending termination. Security will escort you to clear your office. The legal team will be filing both civil and criminal charges for intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Derek turned to me with desperation in his eyes. Michael, you have to understand. I was trying to help your career. Having management backing gives your invention more credibility. I looked him straight in the eye and spoke calmly. Derek, 3 years ago you told me that technical people need to learn their place in the corporate hierarchy. You said we should be grateful for managers who can translate our work into business value. You said innovation without leadership is just tinkering. I was mentoring you, he pleaded. No, I replied. You were stealing from me, and now you're facing the consequences. Patricia stood up. This meeting is concluded. Derek, security will escort you from the building. Michael, congratulations on your groundbreaking invention. The legal team will be correcting the patent application to reflect proper attribution. As security escorted Derek from the room, he tried one last manipulation. Michael, I can make this go away. We can share the patent. 50-50. Think about your future here. I didn't even turn around. My future is fine, Derek. Yours, however, is about to get very complicated. The aftermath was swift and devastating for Derek. Within 48 hours, Innovate Dynamics had fired him for cause and filed a lawsuit seeking $2.3 million in damages for attempted intellectual property theft and breach of contract. The company also reported him to the State Bar Association for professional misconduct, despite Derek not being a practicing attorney. The criminal investigation moved even faster. The district attorney's office had been building cases against corporate intellectual property theft, and Derek's situation provided clear evidence of deliberate fraud. The forensic computer evidence, combined with testimony from his previous victims, created an overwhelming case. Sarah Kim's testimony was particularly damaging. She revealed that Derek had used similar tactics at 3 different companies, stealing designs worth an estimated $8.7 million in potential patent revenue. The prosecutors were able to establish a clear pattern of premeditated intellectual property theft spanning 7 years. Derek's new BMW was repossessed 2 weeks later when he couldn't make payments without his VP salary. His expensive downtown condo went on the market a month after that. Word spread quickly through Seattle's tight-knit tech community about his firing and the criminal charges. But Derek's biggest mistake was trying to defend himself publicly. He contacted TechCrunch and several other industry publications, claiming he was being scapegoated by vindictive employees and that his firing was corporate politics at its worst. He actually gave an interview describing the gyroscope design as his collaborative vision brought to life by technical staff. The interview backfired spectacularly when I released my documentation publicly. I published a detailed blog post titled "The Anatomy of Patent Theft" that included time-stamped screenshots, file metadata, email communications, and a technical breakdown of how Derek's modifications would have destroyed the functionality of my design. The post went viral in engineering communities, garnering over 300,000 views in the first week. The most damaging part was a side-by-side comparison of my original technical specifications with Derek's improved version, clearly showing how he had broken my design through his ignorance of the underlying physics. Derek became a cautionary tale in tech management circles. His interview responses were dissected and mocked on engineering forums. Someone created a meme using his quote about collaborative vision that spread across LinkedIn and Reddit. 6 months later, Derek pleaded guilty to criminal charges of intellectual property theft and fraud. He received 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay $127,000 in restitution to Innovate Dynamics. But the legal consequences were nothing compared to the professional destruction. Derek's reputation in the tech industry was completely radioactive. Every major company in Seattle knew his story. HR departments at tech firms started using his case as an example in management training about intellectual property ethics. He became unemployable in any technical field. I heard through the grapevine that he tried to get jobs at consulting firms, startup accelerators, and even university administration positions. But a simple Google search of his name returned pages of articles about the patent theft case. His attempted comeback lasted about 18 months before he gave up entirely. Meanwhile, my gyroscope design was approved for patent with proper attribution, and the device passed all technical evaluations with flying colors. Boeing signed a development contract worth $23.4 million for the first production run. NASA expressed interest in the technology for future spacecraft navigation systems. Patricia Hernandez promoted me to senior principal engineer and put me in charge of a new advanced navigation systems division. My salary increased by 85%, and I received a patent bonus of $175,000. More importantly, I gained the respect of my colleagues and the recognition I had earned through 3 years of dedicated work. Derek's former BMW dealership contacted me 6 months later, ironically trying to sell me the same model car Derek had been forced to return. I politely declined and bought a Tesla instead. The most satisfying moment came 2 years later at the annual Aerospace Engineering Conference in Denver. I was presenting my gyroscope technology to an audience of 500+ engineers and industry leaders. During the Q&A session, someone mentioned they had heard about intellectual property disputes surrounding the design. Yes, I replied calmly. There was an unfortunate situation where a former manager attempted to claim credit for work he didn't understand. But the legal system worked as intended, and proper attribution was restored. The important thing is that the technology itself is now helping advance aerospace navigation capabilities. The audience nodded approvingly, and we moved on to technical questions about magnetic field calibration. After my presentation, several attendees approached me with similar stories of managers stealing credit from technical staff. Apparently, my case had inspired other engineers to document their work more carefully and stand up for their intellectual property rights. One young engineer from SpaceX thanked me personally. "Your blog post about documenting everything saved my career," she said. "My manager tried to pull the same thing Derek did, but I had learned from your experience. I kept detailed records, And when he tried to steal my propulsion design, I had 2 years of evidence ready. The company sided with me immediately. That conversation made the entire ordeal worthwhile. Looking back, Derek's downfall wasn't really about my revenge. It was about his own arrogance and incompetence. I simply provided the rope. He hanged himself with it. His assumption that technical people were too naive or powerless to defend their work became his fatal flaw. The most important lesson wasn't about revenge or justice, though those certainly played a role. It was about the value of meticulous documentation and quiet competence over loud self-promotion. Derek spent 2 years talking about strategic vision and management leadership, while I spent those same years perfecting designs and documenting innovations. When the truth came out, substance beat style overwhelmingly. These days, I make sure to mentor young engineers about protecting their intellectual property. I've developed a standard presentation about documentation best practices that I give to new hires. The key slides always include Derek's case as an example of what happens when managers try to steal credit from their teams. I still work at Innovate Dynamics, now running a team of 12 brilliant engineers developing next-generation navigation technologies. We've filed 8 patents over the past 2 years, all with proper attribution and shared credit where appropriate. Derek, from what I've heard, ended up selling insurance in Phoenix under his middle name. He apparently tells people he used to work in business development for tech companies. I suppose that's technically true, though not in the way he implies. Sometimes karma needs a little documentation to work properly, but it always works eventually. Michael Chen currently holds 12 patents in aerospace navigation technology and leads the Advanced Navigation Systems division at Innovate Dynamics. His quantum gyroscope design is scheduled for integration into next-generation commercial aircraft beginning in 2024. Derek Patterson could not be reached for comment.